Hey class, due to the fact that we didn't talk about anything on aging in sport and exercise the other day, today we have an online lecture. We'll see how far we get in 15 minutes, because in 15 minutes my free version of Screencast-O-Matic expires. So let's dive in. So our objectives are to understand how the body changes with age, understand the mechanisms of sarcopenia, basically age-related muscle loss, how to assess it, as well as potential treatments. We're looking at resistance training, as well as understand brief content on aging and aerobic performance as well. So, as a medical specialist, what form of exercise would you prescribe your elderly client patient to help prevent slips, trips, falls, and improve activities of daily living? It is going to be resistance training, specifically power training, high velocity contractions. So typically what we see as we age is that the amount of physical activity that people do per day begins to go down. And with that decrease in physical activity, meaning an increase in a sedentary lifestyle, we also see muscle mass decline. So you can see as we age in years, in both men and women, muscle mass per kilogram over here on the y-axis is going down. If we look at our 25-year-old male compared to our 81-year-old male, you can see the fat is only kind of around the muscle a little bit here, and here it starts to take up more space outside the muscle as well as start to infiltrate the muscle. So just a study to show you guys what we end up seeing in terms of decreased fractional synthesis rate, decreased protein synthesis. We also see muscle mass and strength between young, middle-aged, and old individuals. We see strength go down as well as muscle mass. Regarding satellite cell content, one thing I'd like to focus on right here in the red, we see the percent satellite cells in type 2 fibers specifically. So type 2 fibers are more powerful, stronger fibers. So we lose percent satellite cells there, so our percent of satellite cells goes down. And the amount of satellite cells, in the area also goes down. You can see that 12.6 down to about what looks like a 9.7. It's really small and hard to interpret. But we know satellite cells are there for growth and repair. And so we see with older individuals, we see a lot of maladaptation to the type 2 fibers. In terms of weight, what we end up seeing is that typically we gain weight when we are older and sedentary compared to being older and trained. We tend to weigh more, and that is due to fat mass. And we can see that relative to the percent fat mass. If we are trained, and older, we see that the percent body fat is less than if we are older and sedentary. Same with fat mass, obviously, basically looking at the same thing. So with height, weight, and body composition, as we age, our height starts to decrease. Think of grandma who starts to shrink. I think my grandma is now like 4'8", but she's the sweetest little thing ever. Starts around age 35 to 40. You start to see poor posture, and then eventually leading to osteopenia and then osteoporosis. Eventually what we end up seeing is weight increases, kind of in that 25 to 45-year-old range. It might also increase freshman year of college, but that's beside the point. So, sometime between when you start to become a working professional, starting a family, weight will increase because we see a decrease in physical activity and we start eating more. You eat what the kids eat, right? You start eating at the office. And then eventually we see that weight starts to go down. We know a lot of older individuals start to become frail, right? So, about 65 years of age, we start to lose body mass, decrease appetite, start to lose muscle, and then lose weight. So you can see here on the left-hand side, height go down, here weight go up, and then go down for both males and females. It's still, though, higher than being younger. So body fat content tends to increase because we decrease our energy expenditure. Active versus sedentary adults, we see that older athletes typically have less body fat. Older athletes also have less central adiposity, or basically belly fat. Fat-free mass decreases. So fat-free mass, that means muscle mass, starts to decrease. It can start at sarcopenia can start as early as around 30 years old, but it starts to become significant around 40, especially if we're sedentary. So we see with sarcopenia a decrease in protein synthesis, and a lot of this is due to a lack of basically physical activity, and then we see other hormone and insulin like growth factor, some anabolic hormones start to go down as well. So bone mineral content also starts to decrease, especially for the ladies. Bone mineral density is huge. We want to be on the lookout for that, where bone resorption is greater than bone synthesis, and it ends up usually being due to a lack of weight-bearing exercise. So if we look back at pretty much the primary mechanism of this isn't necessarily isn't necessarily the aging process. I mean, the aging process has something to do with it, but you have to think the big thing that we keep going back to, or you keep hearing me say, is lack of weight-bearing exercise, being more sedentary, not being athletic, or being a type of athlete, meaning we've stopped being physically active. So once we stop being physically active, all of these maladaptations occur. So we know that we can mitigate and prevent all of these things from happening. So training alters age-related body composition changes. Okay, we can decrease weight, decrease body fat as well as fat mass, increase our fat-free mass, again, increase muscle mass. But we see our biggest results with both diet as well as exercise. Okay, can have one or the other, but we're going to see the best results with a combination of the two. With aerobic endurance, we typically see VO2 max decrease as well. And to kind of point it all out, a decrease in training intensity is in volume. Again, we've become sedentary, we've become less physically active. So with aging, we see that typically VO2 difference, stroke volume, heart rate all decrease, but then that training intensity and volume all play a role in these things. Again, we can mitigate these maladaptations. Now VO2 goes down, lactate threshold goes down, endurance exercise performance, it gets tough to walk up the stairs, right? So now when we get older, we're not necessarily worried about too much about endurance performance. So that's why we have resistance training. It doesn't really improve our VO2 max, but improves our time to exhaustion, which is something to keep into consideration as we age. And as we age, the biggest thing that we're really looking for is obviously we want our cardiovascular system to be good to go, but we're looking at preventing those falls, preventing those fractures, making sure that we are strong to handle the external environment. So, moving on to sarcopenia, meaning poverty of the flesh. Definition means to decrease in lean body mass, typically seen with aging. It's often associated with an increase in fat mass, sedentary lifestyle, malnutrition, and loss of anabolic responses. Okay, we usually see atrophy and loss of type 2 fibers. So type 2 fibers actually stop becoming innervated, and is largely responsible for a decline in muscle strength. A loss of muscle strength is dynapenia. So we have to distinguish the two. Sarcopenia is a loss of muscle mass as well as an increase of fat mass. And associated with sarcopenia is dynapenia, hence dynamometer, right? Dynamometer measures force output, decline in strength. So here's sarcopenia. We see decrease in the motor units, that type 2 motor units, decrease in the number of muscle fibers because those are not innervated, and an increase in muscle atrophy. There are other factors that are hormonal, nutritional, metabolic, so on and so forth. Muscle mass and strength both go down. Weakness increases, disability increases, and so we become more dependent. If we look sarcopenia, we lose strength, power, endurance, difficulty with weight-bearing tasks, increased risks of falls, increased fatigability, meaning if we have difficulty with weight-bearing task, we have a risk of falls and fractures and increased fatigability. Do we want to be physically active, or does that individual want to be physically active? No. So it's this constant cycle and loop of, okay, we start to lose muscle mass and gain fat because we are physically inactive, kind of, through the younger stages of our life. Then we realize that, oh, I can't do any of these things, so I'm just going to remain less active. And it's just this vicious cycle, and it increases our disability. So let's look again at these causes of hypertrophy. So we have IGF-1, mediate satellite cell activation. We also talked about that IGF hypertrophy signaling pathway, right? Then we have mechano-growth factor, which is a product of IGF-1 gene expression, okay? And it helps aid in tissue and repair and regeneration, specifically of the muscle. And then we have myogenic regulatory factors, myogenic muscle kind of regulatory factors, MyoD, MIF5 and 6. Okay, these are muscle-specific transcription factors, okay, and control muscle cell differentiation and gene expression. So when we're talking about AKT, we're talking about all these things that are improving muscle protein synthesis, okay. These are some of the factors that are helping to build and repair the muscle. So sarcopenia, we end up seeing type 2 myofiber atrophy. Okay, we see chronic denervating of the muscle fibers, meaning the motor units are no longer firing those muscle fibers. Okay, impaired excitation contraction coupling, so calcium release declines with age. Okay, that fiber type grouping, denervation and reinnervation of myofibers as motor units are lost. And then the myofiber number and size decrease 30 to 40% anywhere from the ages of 50 to 80 years of age. So the neuromuscular changes, we mentioned motor unit loss, fiber denervation, and atrophy. Alterations in protein synthesis, we see a decrease in mRNA transcription and protein synthesis. So there's that imbalance between anabolism and catabolism. Okay, we see impaired muscle quality, so decrease in cross bridges per area, motor unit activation, as well as the ability to generate ATP. So we see mitochondrial dysfunction. So the mitochondrial DNA is exposed to more ROS or reactive oxygenated species, which induces DNA damage. Ooh. Go back there. So the mechanisms. Again, physical inactivity, going back to the main thing, not just aging. We also have nutritional insufficiency. Okay, basically a lack of protein intake, specifically to leucine. Hormonal changes, decrease in anabolic hormones, okay, which parallels that decrease in lean muscle mass and strength. Decrease in satellite cell activation, increase pro-inflammatory cytokines, and an increase in myostatin, which is going to limit satellite cell activity, prevent myoblast proliferation, and downregulate MyoD, which is responsible again, okay, for that for the creating of the myotubes. And then TNF alpha suppresses protein synthesis and induces apoptosis and activates this NF-κB pathway, suppressing MyoD, blocking myogenesis or creating muscle fibers. And so what you see right here, here's IGF-1, okay, AKT, helping make MyoD, mTOR, okay, all these things cause muscle protein synthesis, okay, as well as proliferation. Now, what we can see over here is myostatin is going to block MyoD, meaning we're not going to get these myotubes that we would see over here. And here's MIF5, MyoD, okay, what we should typically see in an anabolic process with an upregulation of myostatin, that is going to be blocked and blunted. You can see this NF-κB down here in terms of showing you the protein degradation pathway, okay, all the way down, SMAD2/3s there, and then here is the catabolic process reaction right down there. So things that cause the muscle atrophy, I got 30 seconds. Aging, prolonged rest, sedentary lifestyle. Other things, AIDS, cancer, COPD, denervation, diabetes, spinal cord injury, so on and so forth. Okay, you can see all of these inflammatory processes right here. ROS, nitric oxide. Okay, we see low IGF-1, insulin resistance, and then all of the damage that occurs down at the bottom. Okay, So I'm going to leave you guys at that. We'll wrap up another